Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. I'm Sean Rose and my guest today is Jean-Hubert Martin, who is a chief curator of the Dali exhibition at the Pompidou Center. Dali is the maverick artist of the 20th century. He's the agent provocateur of surrealism. Actually, 30 years ago, there was an exhibition of Dali. Why an exhibition of Dali today? Jean-Hubert Martin.
Well, we actually need to look at Dali in a different way than the way we looked at him 30 years ago. I mean, much time has passed in between. And actually, one can wonder why there wasn't an exhibition of Dali in Paris before, as Picasso, for instance, the other, well, big rival of Dali, had an exhibition every year or almost every 2 years.
Well, perhaps because Dali was a bit of a maverick and also not very, what would say now, PC, not very politically correct. He was, I mean, he was pro-Franco, more or less, and Picasso was a good artist. He was the communist, the one who was engagé. So is that the reason why you think Dali was a bit, you know, poo-pooed by the intelligentsia?
Yeah, certainly. This is one of the reasons, but it's not the only one. There are certainly at least two other reasons. One is that, as Dali said himself, he was an anti-modernist. He was against cubism, he was against abstraction. He wanted to go back to the old technique of the old masters. And another reason is also because he played this role of a sort of fool, of an incredible, crazy guy on television. And he even accepted to do some advertising, like the famous Chocolat Lanvin for French people. This had a sort of bad effect on discrediting him towards the artist and the intelligentsia.
Well, but now with contemporary art, well, Jeff Koons or anybody, you know that advertising and art, or art and fashion, art and the luxury world is all really interconnected. So, I mean, Dali was more like a very avant-garde artist. And what's interesting, though, you said that he was anti-modernist, but his style, I mean, developed. I mean, you can see in the exhibition how his style developed from kind of these different influences from other surrealists, like Max Ernst, for example, to a very, very idiosyncratic, very, really, really particular style of his, you know, of his own.
Yeah, sure. Well, he tried, of course, many styles of the avant-garde movements of the beginning of the century, like any young artist. But from the 20s, he became completely original in creating, well, a type of pictures that had never existed before, using a very traditional technique, like the old masters, and respecting also the perspective. Which was completely anti-modernist again, and creating images of the unconscious, of dreams, of nightmares that have never existed before and that are part nowadays of the collective imagination, of the imaginary.
Yeah, but I think this is, I mean, we call him, I mean, in the history of art books, he's a surrealist, but he is really quite postmodern. I mean, using old art and mixing with, you know, his own forms. But one thing what one notices when one sees his work is actually the fact that, you know, eroticism, bizarre, the subconscious is very present in his work.
Yeah, well, the sexuality is one of the main goals and purpose of his work. He had a very difficult personal sexual life, actually, and he knew Freud. He had written all the texts of Freud, and he's playing then with psychoanalysis in a very subtle way and a very clever one. And he gave these images of what nowadays is the unconscious. This is why also he collaborated with Hitchcock, for instance, you know, giving this incredible part in Spellbound that is the picture of the dream of the actor, of the personage of the film.
Yes, and there are, you say, themes, but also there are pictures from, you know, the old masters that he loved. Like one is Millet, the Angelus. The guys praying. I mean, the man and a woman, a peasant couple praying in the dusk. That's something very emblematic of his work. I mean, it's like a leitmotif.
Yeah, but this is one of his obsessions. He had many, and you see, well, for instance, the ants or the grasshoppers or many others. But you're right, the Angelus was his fetish painting of the 19th century. And he used this Angelus de Millet, these two figures, in many different instances and very many different ways. These two figures are actually praying, but he said, well, that most probably there is a child, a dead child, that they have just buried between them, and which is lying there in a coffin. And then he was so much convinced of that he, well, persuaded the curators of the Louvre at a certain point in the 60s to X-ray the painting, and they actually discovered a sort of very black rectangle underneath the woman. And then he said, you see, well, I was right. Here is the coffin of the little dead child. So, well, this is what's fantastic with Dali, is sometimes he has these incredible fantasies, and it proves to be true afterwards.
Yes, and also about Dali, one can say, at least when one sees now this exhibition and how it's staged, that he was actually an anarchist, really, more than anything else. I mean, he loved, I mean, the power of the individual, the freedom of the individual, and he mocked a bit all sorts of you know, political affiliation. And one of the you know, main pictures, one with Lenin, is actually interesting, how to see how he mocked a bit the Communist Party.
Yeah, he was so much an individual that he said himself that he couldn't have any friend, you know, because he was so much, well, taking care only of himself and pretending that his ideas were the ideas that should, well, be everywhere in the world. And then, yeah, he made this painting a few months probably after he had written an article in a surrealist magazine which had very much to do with sexuality. And the Communist Party, which were very close at that time to Breton, to André Breton, and the Surrealist movements, said that they didn't like this article at all, and that it was going too far, and they couldn't understand these sort of fantasies. And probably the painting of Dali, Hallucination partielle, is an answer to that, because he's put on the piano these 6 little portraits of Lenin, and this was just to give an answer, to tease Breton, of course, who couldn't agree with that at that time when he was close to the Communist Party.
But though he was not a political artist, he was very aware of the situation, the historical moment, and he would paint things. Like one extraordinary painting is the Premonition of the War, which he painted in 1936, just before the outbreak of the Civil War. And it is like his Guernica, as it were. I mean, you have Picasso painted the Guernica painting, and he painted that big painting, which is, you know, quite impressive.
Yeah, well, in no way Dali could be part of a political movement. This goes totally against his totally individual point of view. And he was always alone, but he was feeling very much his time, and he had a fantastic intuition about what was happening in the world, and his painting is full of sort of metaphors of the dramatic situation, especially of the 30s, of the late 30s in Europe. And this painting called actually Construction molle avec des haricots bouillis, which is a soft construction with boiled beans, exactly. It is a fantastic picture of what is going to develop in Spain a few months later, that is the Civil War.
Another aspect of Dali which is interesting is that because he hated to be part of a dogma, part of a system, at the end of his life, towards the end, he was like professing to be a Roman Catholic artist and painted, Catholic or religious paintings.
Yeah, this is one of the paradoxes, and there are many with Dali, of course, is that he couldn't be affiliated to any political party, but he couldn't also agree with anything which seemed to him already conventional. And he had the feeling after Second World War that surrealism was already more or less accepted, at least in the intelligentsia, or part of it, and that it wasn't new anymore, it wasn't provocative anymore. And then he declared that the most provocative attitude for him in the 50s was to be religious, and as you said, to be Roman Apostolic. But he added that he couldn't find the faith.
This is a typical Dali answer. Thank you, Jean-Hubert Martin, for accepting the invitation for a France 24 interview. Stay tuned for more news on France 24.